Downs Daily here. Beau, Bishop, Nathan Zegura along with you, one of our great friends, the NFL Network, Steve Wyche, joining us here on the hotline. Steve, we initially planned to talk to you about having us in the playoffs in 2020, and we will get to that over the course of our conversation, but obviously much more bigger and pressing issues off the top. And I've watched a lot of your coverage on the NFL Network, and it's fascinating to see the players and the platform that has been given to them and the way that you've orchestrated some of those things and had those town halls. I really recommend our listeners go listen to those. I think you can learn a lot. I know I have. What was your approach as a broadcaster, as a journalist coming into your Monday shows in terms of what you were trying to get accomplished and just kind of how you wanted to go about your business?
Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate you putting this at the forefront of the discussion because that's where we are right now. And look, when the network decided to have these roundtables to discuss this issue, one, it was in part because we didn't want to seem tone deaf. I mean, this is what this country is engaged in right now. It's what we're embroiled in. And so we decided to get some very smart, authentic players and journalists with credibility to speak on a lot of these different issues, right? A lot of the systemic issues that have led to the anger, police brutality, Colin Kaepernick. So, we tried to really embody those. We had a panel with myself, Josh McCown, who's on the Players Coalition, Josh Norman, and Michael Robinson. There's another panel with Jim Trotter and Kurt Warner and Dr. Todd Boyd, a sociologist from USC. And then we've got one running today, which is just incredible, with Chris Long, Richard Sherman, and Jim Trotter and myself. And these are, no feelings are spared. Perspectives from all angles are given. And these are very smart people who've done things for years in the community. Chris Long, the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Richard Sherman, people who won't bite their tongue. And this is a different time for the NFL Network because of the first three letters of our network. We're having discussions where we hold the league's feet to the fire. Because of the lack of diversity in the league office with its coaches and general managers and whatnot. So these are very raw, but these are very important. And as Chris Long said today, if you're tired of hearing about this stuff when you come to turn into sports, then help solve the issues so we don't have to hear about it. Let's try to find. We're here because there's another case where an unarmed black man was killed by police. We've seen this a million times. So if you're tired of hearing about it, well, let's find ways to stop this from happening, and then we won't have to hear about it. And it's a sensical yet difficult issue to not only address but to find solutions for. But that's why these discussions have been so deep and so inflamed and so necessary. And I'm glad we were given the platform to have these discussions.
We certainly know Josh McCown well from his time here in Cleveland and what a tremendous man that he is. Steve, when you had that one with Josh McCown and Josh Norm, Michael Robinson, any of these, what's really struck you? Has there been one thing that really resonated with you? You said, man, that's powerful. That's something that everybody needs to hear.
Well, I mean, as a black man myself, hearing somebody who's empathetic like a Josh McCown or Chris Long, white players. We've seen a lot more white players and white people overall stand up and step up to recognize this isn't a matter of black and white, but right and wrong. And, when Josh McCown said that after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, he was at he's very religious, and he was at a chapel, team chapel with a bunch of players, mostly black, and he's hearing a lot of their anger, a lot of their worry, and, he said something like black people walk around with a weighted vest. And he drew this analogy. He said he's had a different coordinator for every year of his career, which has been 19 NFL seasons. So he's always trying to learn the offense while the incumbent already knows the offense, and now he's reading defenses. And he said, so most people in white America are the incumbent. They're not worried about just doing what it takes to make the team and survive. They're already moving forward, reading the defenses and moving the team down the field. And so it was a really great analogy using football terms that he was able to empathize and understand, and hopefully some of these things can, help other people understand. We're not all going to feel the same way about everything, but if we can put ourselves in each other's shoes and circumstances and maybe understand the why of why people, respond certain ways and react to certain ways. That'll help us. That'll help us hopefully bridge a gap, but it's unfortunate because as much as I'm seeing this engagement and seeing this, there's still such a lack of hope that something substantive will come out of this, because we've seen this happen before. We've seen the outrage. We've seen the protest, and then we go about our lives. And so we're hoping, I know the Browns have been very engaged in their community for years to try to do things. We're hoping that something substantive can come out of this so we can stop seeing some of the things that we've seen, such as, again, unarmed black men losing their lives when things don't have to be escalated to that point.
Steve Wyche, our guest, NFL Network host and reporter. Steve, one thing that struck me during this in the few days here over the weekend and then early part of this week is NFL players are in my opinion, are uniquely qualified to speak on this, because I don't believe that there is a more diverse group of humans that are thrust into one thing where they all have to get together more than the NFL. Such a diverse, wide array, not only races but economic, socioeconomic backgrounds. And when it all comes together, you don't see any of it. You just see a teammate and a brother, and you have one for life. And you think of you mentioned Chris Long, who obviously was the son of Howie Long and had that, but then played alongside Malcolm Jenkins and had a very different background, obviously, and what Malcolm's doing, and they've found common ground on these things. And it's kind of the beauty of football, I think, Steve, and I think it's one thing that I've noticed. I'm curious if you have as well this week.
Boy, people are going to find you as an outlier saying that athletes actually are qualified to speak on this. And I applaud you for saying that, because I could not agree more. Because the locker rooms, this is where blacks, whites, Latinos, Polynesians, people from the deep countries, farms of Iowa, to the most urban cities of Cleveland and Detroit, to suburban, that's where they get together for a common goal. And, if you pull, just one thread away from what everyone's trying to accomplish, you make a mistake and your team loses. And, if society can see that that way, like, you might not like the play that's called, but if everybody executes it properly, you might gain 8 yards and get the first down. Okay. You might not like your head coach because he dog cusses you, but if you go out and you do things the right way and you play to your ability and you trust the guy to your right and your left, you might make that stop. And so I could not agree more with you that a lot of these athletes are, do have a perspective that a lot of us don't. Look, I grew up outside of St. Louis, about 35 miles outside of St. Louis. I was one of the few black people in my town. And to this day, there are areas of that city where the white families who live in the suburbs never have to with people of other races voluntarily. And, that's where so much gets lost. Not saying that they have to or need to, but if there's some type of just getting to know and having discussions, they don't even have to be about race, but just getting to know somebody and saying, wow, this person's not what I thought, that will help us maybe understand, again, why there's reactions to certain things or why there's a lack of trust in certain things. And, again, I'm being very Pollyanna here because this discussion has happened many times, but this is where athletes who a lot of times when they leave that locker room, they go about their ways. And they don't deal with this, but at least for those 3 hours a day and those 3 hours on Sunday, they bring us all together because we pay money to see them in the stands. We watch them on TV. We cover them in the media. We're not thinking about black or white during any of that.
You're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why we say sports is the great unifier. And I know your discussion with Richard Sherman and Chris Long centered around how players can use their platforms. And Beau and I were talking about this yesterday that, Michael Jordan even talked about it in The Last Dance. That's not something he wanted to get into. Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model. We have a generation now of athletes, and a lot of it has to do with social media and their direct access to their fans, et cetera, where players are now more empowered than ever to be a fundamental part of the change and share their experiences. And I think we're seeing that, and I think that has a chance to really turn, what could be a snowball into an avalanche because of the popularity. What you just said, when you talk about these players on a Sunday, you don't see them for their race. You're talking about them as athletes. You're talking about them as people. And so now they're showing just how real they are with their ability to directly relate. We have a player on our team, Larry Ogunjobi, Steve, who had a 4-part tweet. Today's his birthday, and I thought it was incredibly powerful. And that's just stuff you wouldn't have seen years ago, and I think that has a chance to be a real engine for change.
Well, look, and part of it's just the evolution of what we're doing in society now. We've got cameras to record the injustices that before people just heard about and dismissed. Like, what are you worried about? You've got a good job. You've got a nice house, in good schools. Why are you telling me, why are you talking about police brutality? Well, now we've got phones to capture it, so those who doubted can see it. Yep. I mean, there's no way you could watch that video of George Floyd getting, dying under the knee of a police officer who's got his hand in his pocket and a look on his face like he's thinking about sunsets in Jamaica and not be upset. Right. There's unless you were just that much of a demonic racist where you thought that was okay, there's no way you could not be upset about that. So players can see that. People can see that. And now players are social media. This is a different generation where they've, from the time I've got kids who are in their 20s, and from the time for 10, 15 years now, they've been on social media speaking their minds. It's just the way it is. And so you're right. I think change can be affected in large part just because that's where we are in this world and the tools that are allowing us to see some of the truths that before were masked, shadowed, or not paid attention to.
Now, one thing that I saw today, and Drew Brees has said some things very positively in this situation, but also talked about protests returning and didn't like it. His teammate, and this is, again, to your point, Michael Thomas said, we don't care if you don't like it, and I don't care. I don't think anybody does. How do you think that is going to play out as we do get back? Because it sounds like, teams could be returning for training camp. There is going to be a reunion of these people, and we talk about the locker room being a great unifier for a common purpose, but I think there are going to be a lot of people by that time coming into this with various perspectives and various beliefs that I think that will be a very interesting time as well in terms of how teams come together. The dialogue, face-to-face dialogue, as we all know, Steve, it is much easier to say something on Twitter than it is to say it to somebody's face, and I think that could be a very powerful time as well.
Well, those two better. Hopefully, one of them picked up the phone because I don't know if people saw what Drew Brees said in an interview that's been retweeted, but he was asked what he was thinking about if players come back and kneel during the national anthem, and he spoke about, I will never disrespect that anthem or the flag, blah blah. And this is where people like myself and so many others are like, you completely missed
it. Yep.
You completely missed it. It is not the reaction or the action of the national anthem. It is the why. It is because people are continuing to die under the knee of unchecked police brutality. I mean, the fact that the only reason we know Ahmaud Arbery's name is because one of the killers leaked a tape showing them killing him because they thought it would clear him. That's the only reason we know about it. The only reason we really know about this nationally. 2 months after the fact. It's unchecked accountability. And so, when people come back into the locker rooms, I've talked to coaches. I'm on these Zoom video calls. I was on with Sean McDermott from the Bills today. He said, look, Monday we talked about it. We talked, but doing it in a Zoom is different from doing it in person because you might have your kid next to you and you're just listening while you're trying to comfort your 2-year-old kid. Your attention might not be fully engaged. So I think when players come back, first off, they're going to miss being around each other. They're going to miss being, even running routes on air. So the football part of it is absolutely going to take precedent. But conversations may need to be had. And hopefully Drew and Michael Thomas can hash this out before they get there. Because there's a lot of folks right now who saw it like, there you go. This is Colin Kaepernick's message being co-opted and turned into something that has nothing to do with it. And that is an anger people have felt for 4 years. Like, here we go once again. And it's just like there's a message out there today that someone said, a lot of folks are saying, not to dismiss the death of George Floyd, but why are people destroying buildings? When it should say, it's a shame that people are destroying buildings, but it's even worse of a shame that George Floyd is dead. Like they're emphasizing the wrong point. And that's what, this thing by Drew Brees, it's hot. It's, we're all at home. We've got nothing else to talk about right now. And so, again, hopefully guys can have conversations and be men about it and clarify things before they get back to this, or it could be divisive.
It's really frustrating. I can count the amount of times I've had to explain that to people in terms of what Kaepernick was doing and how that was politicized into something that it had nothing to do with. And I'm sure you've had that a bunch of times, Steve, and Nathan, you too. Like I've had to tell the same people. I've had to explain the same people over and over. Like it doesn't sink in. And so to have Drew do this is to still not understand that. That's a shocking. I just am seeing that now, so that's a pretty shocking development.
We were doing Browns
It's not
Daily
shocking,
then.
guys. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
It's not shocking. It's not shocking. And I will say this. Some people just don't want to. They just don't want to. Okay, there's some people who are like, I get it, man. Like, man, my bad. I didn't even realize I was saying it in a way that could hurt feelings or offend or misconstrue the point. But other people are like, I don't care. I don't care. And part of the discussions we've had on the roundtable, I believe it was Michael Robinson or Josh Norman or somebody who said you can talk to people who they're blue in the face, but they feel that because we're football players and have all this money that we can't be pulled over for driving while black. And if we are, we've got the money to afford the lawyers to get us off. So why are we complaining? He's like, there's just some people with that mindset who you're never going to penetrate until it hits them in the face. And that's usually how it goes with a lot of things in this country. And, look, that's a reality a lot of us have to live with. And trust me, I mean, navigating through situations like that is just a way of life. It's in our faces right now, but will we do anything to make things any better, any worse? I mean, I'm just very interested to see how this plays out a month from now when we're talking about being in training camps, sports-wise, or we're moving on with our, we're back in our offices, and to see how people deal with things.
You're absolutely right. And, Beau, you were talking about that period of time, and we were doing Browns Daily, obviously, every day during that time, and taking calls during that time. And it was one of the more illuminating but / depressing times. And I remember, you guys remember how hot it was. I mean, you basically had the president coming after the NFL. It became a massive, massive thing. I will never forget, though, we played in Indianapolis in the 2017 season, and we had a few players who in that game knelt. It was early in the season, who knelt in the pregame. And I get the chance to be on the sideline, so I'm right next to the bench. I heard some of the most disgusting racial epithets lobbed at our players from people in the first few rows at Lucas Oil Field Stadium that day, and I was disgusted. And in my mind, I just remember thinking then, A, how disgusting it was, and I was trying to see if I could figure out so I could say something, and I could not. But B, the fact that this is going on in the year 2017 is exactly why they were doing what they were doing. The fact that they could go into a stadium and hear these things, that's why this is happening. And the fact that that's them doing that is inciting this again, it's like they don't get it. And that is racism, and it was disgusting, and I will never forget that moment. Never.
Yeah, trust me, those players have heard this outside of football stadiums before.
Yep.
Not just in stadiums. They hear it outside of stadiums. So that part of it was nothing new, I'm sure.
Steve, thank you so much for your time. We'll have you on down the road. We're dealing with pandemic as well, by the way, so it's a lot of heavy stuff. And talk a little bit about what you like in our football team. And we'll do that at another time. But this was something we really wanted to do today, and we really appreciate your expertise and giving us a little bit of your time, my friend.
Absolutely, guys. Let's just all learn and try our best to be better. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
That's one of our great friends, Steve Wyche, there, NFL Network.